The well-known apologist um, Lee Strobel has written a number of books: The Case for Christ, The Case for Faith, Case for Easter, and one of those uh, is called The Case for Creator. Now, I have not the original case for the Creator, but the student edition, which is intended for high school children, apparently, high school kids, maybe middle school as well. But there was something in here that I wanted to address. Strobel, there's a little box on page 38, um, which I wanted to read. Is macro if ma the title in the box is If Macroevolution is True. Evolutionary biologist and historian William Provine of Cornell University said that if macroevolution is true, then there are five inescapable conclusions. 1. There is no evidence for God. 2. There is no life after death. 3. There is no absolute foundation for right and wrong. 4. There is no ultimate meaning for life. And 5. People don't really have free will. Those are pretty radical concessions for an ardent Darwinist to make. What do you think? Are you convinced his five conclusions are true, or do you have doubts about any of them? The first thing I wanted to say, just as an aside, is that the term macroevolution um, is almost as um, obscure as the term evolution. When people who reject evolution within the Christian community, what they mean normally is that they reject macroevolution. But what they mean by macroevolution, I think, is different from how that is defined in the scientific community. So I hope that people in the future will be more clear about that. As I understand it, macroevolution is the change from is speciation, the change from one species to another. And species are what can basically defined as what can interbreed with what. Um, but the Christian who is against macroevolution is normally not against that per se. What they're against is one kind evolving into another kind. So there could be many species within the dog kind, and it's the dog kind that can't evolve to another species on that view. So um, the term macroevolution is used too ambiguously in creationist writings, I would say. But that's just an aside. The question that Strobel is asking us is, are we convinced by these five conclusions? Now, I didn't look up the reference, so I don't know the exact wording of William Provine, but it says here in Strobel's book that Provine is presenting these as inescapable conclusions. And to speak of inescapable conclusions within science, within biology in this case, um, that seems a bit radical. We normally say that logical, deductive arguments have inescapable conclusions, assuming the premises are all true and the argument is valid. But in science, there is a certain tentativeness to it. Um, but these five conclusions, I think, are based on a confusion, an equivocation between evolution and naturalism. Um, the biological theory of neo-Darwinian evolution is not equivalent to philosophical materialism or philosophical naturalism. They are two different things. Naturalists tend to be evolutionists, but evolution is not uh, uh, naturalism is not a necessary component of evolution. Evolution is a science. Naturalism is a philosophy or a worldview. So it's important that people like Provine and Richard Dawkins and others keep this in mind. If science has demonstrated that macroevolution has occurred, that says nothing whatsoever against the existence of God or the truth of atheism. Now, the first conclusion, the first inescapable conclusion, quote unquote, is that there is no evidence for God. I think what Provine is getting at there is that the only evidence for God is um, the design of the biological realm. But that's simply not true. There's all kinds of evidence apart from biological design for the existence of God. And if evolution is true, if macroevolution has occurred, then um, it could be that God has used macroevolution to create. So evidence for macroevolution is not evidence against God. It could still be, uh, it's possible in principle that God is necessary to explain evolution, even macroevolution. So there's no evidence for God. That's false. There's no life after death. Again, there's no connection between macroevolution and substance dualism, say, being false. Those are two different things. And evolution could be true or false. It doesn't say anything against uh, or relevant to substance dualism being false. So all of these things, as I said, tend to conflate the naturalism with evolution, um, which is a mistake. All right, so uh, when you I do like the third conclusion. I don't agree with it, but I like the fact that he's bringing it up, and also the fifth one, because there's no um, absolute foundation for right and wrong as his third conclusion. On a naturalistic view, that is indeed correct, that there is no foundation for right and wrong, and therefore uh, the atheist, who is also a materialist or a naturalist, they have to, if they're going to be consistent with their worldview, they cannot admit uh, ethics, good and bad. They cannot do that. That doesn't mean that they go and kill people, as Julia Sweeney would say, but it, it it means that there's no foundation to say to base the unethical practice of murder in. You can't say killing people is bad. You can just say that you don't do it, perhaps because you're afraid of getting in trouble with the authorities. Um, and then the fifth conclusion: people don't really have free will. That does seem to be a conclusion of naturalism, um, but that, like the lack of morality, contradicts our daily experience. So um, I think that naturalism is impoverished when it comes to explanatory power for our everyday um, experiences. But check out the book, uh, The Case for a Creator. It's a pretty good book. Um, the chapter on evolution, by the way, doesn't really argue against macroevolution. It argues against atheistic, um, the atheistic generation of life from non-life, and Strobel is careful to distinguish that from a case against macroevolution. Uh, just so you are aware of that. All right, shalom to you all, and have a great and wonderful. Ah, my head itches. A great and wonderful day. Bye now.